Have you ever been underestimated because of your age, your appearance, or just the assumptions others make about you? Imagine sitting on a flight, the hum of the engines masking the storm brewing outside, and suddenly the captain's voice cuts through the cabin, trembling with fear. Is there any fighter pilot on board? Panic spreads instantly. Passengers clutch armrests. Mothers hold their children tight, and everyone scans the aisles, searching desperately for someone who can save them. Now, imagine the people best equipped to handle this crisis are two 14-year-old girls, quietly seated in economy, dismissed and overlooked by everyone around them. What would you do if your life, or the lives of hundreds, depended on recognizing hidden talent and stepping aside to let it lead? How would you respond when courage and expertise come from the most unexpected place? As you picture yourself in their shoes, think about the choices that define character to panic, to hesitate, or to act with calm and determination. These twins faced a storm, not just in the sky, but in the prejudices of every eye watching them. Join us as we uncover their extraordinary journey, where preparation, skill, and courage rewrite the rules of what it means to be a hero. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to follow this incredible story from start to finish. The first thing anyone remembered was the sound of the captain's voice. It wasn't calm. It wasn't routine. It carried a tremor, the kind that cut straight through the cabin like an electric current. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miguel Alvarez. A pause. Then the words that froze every heart I need to know immediately. Is there any military pilot, any fighter pilot on board this aircraft? For half a second, the cabin sat in a stunned silence. Then the noise erupted. Gasps, whispers, the sound of seatbelts tightening. A woman clutched her baby closer. A man crossed himself, lips moving in a prayer he had not said in years. The businessman in first class, Richard Collins, cursed under his breath and pulled his jacket tighter as if fabric alone could shield him from disaster. The plane rattled, a deep vibration that hummed through the floor and armrests. Overhead, bins shuddered. Lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Captain Alvarez's voice cracked through again, louder this time, carrying something that veteran travelers recognized with dread, raw fear. This is not a drill. If there is any fighter pilot, any military-trained pilot on this plane, please come forward. No one moved. 216 passengers sat frozen, exchanging panicked looks, hoping anyone would stand up. But row after row remained motionless. Mothers pressed their children's heads against their shoulders. Businessmen stared at the carpet. Retired veterans, scattered here and there, looked down at their hands, remembering training decades old and knowing they weren't capable anymore. And in economy, row 27 seats A and B. Two young girls stirred in their sleep. Ava Brooks shifted first, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek, her eyelids heavy from exhaustion. Beside her, her twin sister Aria exhaled, still half lost in a dream. Their heads leaned close together, as if they were born to move through life side by side. They didn't hear the fear yet. They didn't hear the captain's desperation. For the moment, they were still just two teenagers, 14 years old, sleeping on a Tuesday afternoon flight from Denver to Atlanta. But the rest of the cabin felt the weight of death hovering inches above them. The tension grew sharp enough to cut. Passengers craned their necks, searching for a savior. Some eyes lingered on tall men in business suits, assuming size equaled skill. Others glanced hopefully at older travelers, thinking perhaps one of them had military experience. But every second ticked by without movement. No one answered. In the galley, flight attendants exchanged frantic looks. Rosa Mitchell, the lead attendant with 20 years in the sky, swallowed hard. She had faced turbulence, medical crises, even unruly passengers, but never once had she heard a captain plead for a fighter pilot mid-flight. Her professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the same dread that was now spreading like wildfire among the passengers. Back in first class, Richard Collins muttered again, louder this time, "This is ridiculous. What kind of airline doesn't have control of its own cockpit?" But his words were drowned out by the metallic groan of the aircraft adjusting against turbulence. Captain Alvarez's voice returned, strained, breaking through the static of the intercom. "We are experiencing significant system issues. Repeat, this is an emergency. I need assistance from anyone with advanced military flight experience. If that is you, signal a flight attendant immediately." The words dropped into the cabin like stones into water. Ripples of panic followed. People shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the aisles, waiting for the miracle of a volunteer. Still, no one moved, and somewhere in the back. Aria Brooks stirred. She rubbed her eyes, turned toward the window where the clouds outside looked strangely bruised with darkening storm. She yawned, unaware that every soul on board was one breath away from despair. If you ask the survivors of Flight 982 later, they'll tell you this was the moment when fear wrapped around them like chains, when they realized they were trapped 37,000 feet in the air with no exit, no control, and no guarantee that anyone alive could bring them home. This was the moment they all began to wonder if they'd ever touch the ground again. And yet, against all logic, against all prejudice, two young sisters were already written into this story. They were asleep now, but soon, the weight of 200 lives would rest in their hands. The cabin didn't know it yet. The attendants didn't know. Even the desperate co-pilot sitting beside an ailing captain didn't know. But history was about to be rewritten. Not by the powerful, not by the wealthy, not by the obvious heroes, by two black twin girls. 3 hours earlier, Denver International bustled with its usual rhythm, rolling suitcases, fast food smells, boarding announcements echoing across high ceilings. For most travelers, it was another Tuesday. For Ava and Aria Brooks, it was a pilgrimage. The twins weren't flying for fun. Their grandfather, Henry Carter, was waiting in Atlanta. Or rather, he was lying in a hospital bed, lungs weakened by cancer, strength fading with each breath. He had once been the man who showed them how to build paper airplanes that actually glided instead of nosediving. He had once been the mechanic who kept Tuskegee Airmen aircraft in the sky during World War II, turning wrenches while the world doubted his worth. Now, at 79, time was catching him. This trip might be the last chance they had to say goodbye. The girls carried that weight quietly. Ava tucked an old leather-bound notebook into her backpack, filled with diagrams and equations she had scribbled late at night. Aria carried a small box wrapped in tissue paper. Inside were 2 handcrafted model planes they had built, painted silver with shaky hands. They wanted to show them to the man who had first told them. Baby girls, the sky is not your limit. It's just your starting point. At the gate, the weight of prejudice met them first. The agent behind the counter, a woman named Carol, squinted at their boarding passes as if she were hunting for a mistake. Unaccompanied minors, she asked, voice too loud. Heads turned. Ava and Arya nodded politely. Already used to this script, Carol leaned forward. You'll need extra supervision. We can't have kids your age disrupting the cabin. We've flown dozens of times before, Ava explained, her voice even, careful not to sound defensive. Our paperwork is complete. Our seats are together. Carol pursed her lips. Actually, airline policy suggests distributing minors throughout the aircraft so attendants can keep an eye on you. Arya's jaw tightened. We're not toddlers, she muttered, but Ava gently touched her arm. Arya bit back the rest of her words. They knew this game. 2 black girls traveling alone were automatically assumed incompetent. No matter how neatly their hair was braided, no matter how carefully they held their documents, authority figures seemed determined to remind them where they supposedly belonged. When Carol finally printed their passes, she spoke slowly, exaggerating each word as though English were not their first language. Gate B 23, that's where you go. Arya forced a smile, but inside she seethed. She wanted to snap back, to remind the stranger that she had logged more hours on advanced flight simulators than most private pilots. But Ava's calm presence anchored her. They gathered their things and walked away, heads high, carrying the sting in silence. The prejudice didn't end there. Once they boarded, flight attendant Rosa Mitchell intercepted them near the galley. Her smile was professional, but her eyes carried assumptions she didn't bother to hide. You must be nervous, she said warmly, crouching a little as though addressing children in kindergarten. Let me show you how to buckle your seatbelts properly. Okay. Arya opened her mouth, but Ava beat her to it. Thank you. We've got it. Still. Rosa continued the routine, pointing out bathrooms, explaining turbulence, assuring them that flying is very safe. Her tone was syrupy, the same one adults use when trying to soothe children afraid of monsters under the bed. Arya's cheeks burned. She thought of her mother, Colonel Naomi Brooks, pulling 9G turns in an F-16 not asking anyone's permission to belong. She thought of their grandfather, who had fought against voices that said he wasn't smart enough to handle military machinery. And here they were, reduced again to being scared little girls in the eyes of a stranger. But they smiled politely, sliding into seats 27A and 27B, saving their frustration for whispered conversations. Row 27 wasn't glamorous. The overhead bins rattled. The engine's hum pressed against their eardrums, and economy legroom reminded them both that comfort was a luxury. But to them, it didn't matter. They carried with them the reason for their journey. Then came Richard Collins. He was a businessman in his 50s, silver hair slicked back, Rolex glinting beneath cabin lights. He had upgraded to first class, and from the moment he spotted Ava and Arya in line, his irritation bloomed. As they stored their bags, he muttered loudly enough for others to hear, "Kids traveling alone. That's exactly what we need. Noise, drama, crying. I paid for peace, not daycare." His seatmate, an exhausted mother with a toddler, looked away, unwilling to engage. But Richard pressed on. These airlines should ban it. No supervision, no discipline, just a liability waiting to happen. He gestured vaguely toward the twins. Look at them. Probably trouble. Arya heard every word, her fists clenched beneath her jacket. But Ava's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Not now. That squeeze said, let him talk. And so they sat, They sat with patience that came from years of being judged before speaking. They sat with the knowledge that prejudice always assumed the worst of them. They sat with the heavy awareness that they had been raised to prove people wrong not by shouting, but by showing. The cabin filled, overhead bins slammed shut. Announcements repeated themselves in practiced monotone. Families shuffled children into middle seats. Businessmen opened laptops. Retired couples unfolded crossword puzzles. Ava opened her worn aviation manual, the one she carried like other kids carried comic books. Her eyes traced diagrams of hydraulic systems, her pencil sketching notes in the margins. Aria pulled out her tablet, loaded the simulator she had practiced on for years. The interface was second nature to her now. Weather patterns, emergency scenarios, every what-if question a curious mind could ask. No one around them knew. No one cared. To the world on that flight, they were just two black girls traveling alone, a potential inconvenience to manage. What no one imagined was that in a few short hours, the lives of every single person on board would rest on the very knowledge those girls carried quietly in their laps. When the captain's voice would later crackle with fear, no one would think of row 27. No one would look at Ava's notebook or Aria's tablet and realize salvation sat quietly beneath their noses. For now, the girls sat in silence, enduring the sting of assumptions, waiting to fly toward Atlanta, toward their grandfather, toward one last chance to say goodbye. The engines roared. The plane lifted. The ground fell away, and high above the Rockies, the sky waited to test them. The flight had settled into that strange quiet that comes once the wheels leave the ground and the plane steadies itself in the sky. The engines droned steadily. Overhead, lights dimmed, and attendants wheeled carts down the narrow aisles. For most passengers, it was time to order a drink, unfold a laptop, or drift into half-sleep. For Ava and Aria Brooks, it was time to breathe through the sting of every look they had already endured. Aria tapped her finger on the tablet balanced on her tray. She wasn't playing a game, though, to anyone passing by. It looked like it. What glowed on the screen was an advanced simulator program, one she had practiced for years. She adjusted flight paths, recalculated speeds, simulated storm turbulence. To her, it was second nature, but to everyone else, she was just a kid fiddling with the screen. From across the aisle, a middle-aged woman leaned toward her husband and whispered loudly, not bothering to hide it. That's what kids do these days, always glued to their devices, no attention span at all. Her husband chuckled. Hope they don't cause trouble. Can you imagine if something serious happened? Aria heard every word. She swallowed, heat rising in her chest, and turned toward the window. Ava glanced at her, catching the flicker of anger in her sister's face. Let it go, Ava whispered. We're used to this. But why should we be? Aria hissed softly. We know more about this plane than half the crew, and all they see are kids, black kids. Ava closed her notebook, placing it gently on her lap, because proving them wrong takes time, and sometimes patience is our weapon. Her voice was calm, but inside, Ava felt the same weight. She had memorized more manuals than most trainee pilots, knew the maximum thrust of a Boeing 737's CFM56 engines, could rattle off hydraulic emergency protocols by heart. Yet not one adult in this cabin would believe her if she spoke. The cabin smelled faintly of reheated meals and coffee, somewhere up front. Richard Collins pressed the call button, demanding another glass of red wine. His voice carried back through the rows. These kids shouldn't be scattered in economy. I told the attendant earlier, it makes people nervous. They should be kept at the back with supervision. This isn't a daycare." The words stung like barbs. The mother across from them shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. A teenage boy 2 rows ahead smirked, as if agreeing silently. Arya's knuckles whitened. She wanted to stand, to tell this man exactly who their mother was, what kind of training they had endured, what they were capable of. She imagined the look on his face if he knew they could probably fly this aircraft better than he could operate his own car. But she stayed seated. It wasn't silence that kept her there. It was discipline. Discipline hammered into them by Colonel Naomi Brooks, their mother, who had drilled into their minds that dignity wasn't about shouting back, it was about standing firm, waiting for the right moment, and then showing what you were made of when the world least expected it. Ava rested her head against the seat back, closing her eyes briefly. She thought of their grandfather Henry. She thought of the frail sound of his voice over the phone 2 nights earlier, whispering, "Baby girls, I hope I see you one more time." That was why they were here. Not to argue with businessmen, not to prove themselves to flight attendants, but to reach Atlanta before time stole their chance. The plane rattled lightly with turbulence. A few passengers gasped. Rosa Mitchell, ever composed, strolled through the aisles with a smile pasted on her face. When she reached row 27, she leaned down again. "Everything all right. Girls, remember, turbulence is perfectly safe, just like bumps in the road." "We know," Ava replied gently, but Rosa didn't believe them. She patted Arya's shoulder as if calming a skittish child. "Try not to worry. Just close your eyes and sleep." "Okay." As she moved away, Arya muttered under her breath, "Sleep," she says. "We're probably more awake than she'll ever be." Ava didn't argue. She just opened her notebook again, flipping to a page filled with neat diagrams of redundant hydraulic systems. Her pencil tapped quietly in the margin as the engines hummed. At that same moment, far ahead in the cockpit, Captain Miguel Alvarez frowned at a tiny fluctuation on the panel. Nothing alarming yet. Nothing that would raise a red flag in the manuals. Just a feeling. After 25 years in the sky, he had learned to trust those feelings. He leaned toward his co-pilot, Claire Jennings. "Keep an eye on System B hydraulics," he said quietly. "Numbers look steady, but something feels off." Claire nodded, scanning her instruments. "Everything reads within limits." "Captain, maybe a bit higher than usual, but still green." Alvarez grunted softly. "Green until it's not." In row 27, Ava caught a reflection on Rosa's tablet as she passed again. She stiffened. Numbers flickered faintly on the screen, a hint of temperature rising in engine 2. Hydraulic indicators dipping a fraction below norm. It was quick, barely noticeable, but Ava had memorized enough displays to recognize the pattern. She leaned toward Rosa as the attendant reached to secure an overhead bin. "Excuse me," Ava said politely. "I think there may be an issue with the hydraulic systems. I noticed some unusual readings." Rosa blinked at her. "Sweetheart, that's just normal airplane stuff. These machines hum and beep all the time. Don't worry." Ava tried again. "I've studied aircraft systems. The vibration pattern during takeoff and those readings you just passed by suggest something more serious." Rosa straightened, her smile tightening. "Listen, honey, you've been reading too many books. Leave the flying to the professionals." "All right." She walked on before Ava could respond. Arya turned, whispering fiercely, Why did you even try? You knew she wouldn't listen. Because we have to, Ava said, voice low but firm. If something goes wrong, at least I'll know I didn't stay silent. Arya slumped back, arms crossed, heart pounding. She wanted to scream. Instead, she looked at the storm forming outside the window. The clouds were darker now, swelling in the distance, churning with a menace most passengers couldn't yet recognize. Somewhere deep inside, both sisters knew silence would not be an option for much longer. The first half hour of the flight passed quietly enough. The Rockies faded beneath them, snow-capped peaks giving way to rolling plains. Most passengers had eased into the rhythm of flying, reading magazines, watching movies, or drifting to sleep. But Ava Brooks kept glancing out the window, her eyes darting between the horizon and the faint reflections bouncing off the glossy surface of Rosa Mitchell's tablet as the attendant moved through the aisle. It wasn't just curiosity, it was instinct. She noticed a slight tremor in the airframe, more than the usual bumps of cruising altitude. A low vibration rolled through the cabin floor, subtle but distinct, like the steady pulse of a heartbeat that wasn't quite right. She looked back at her notes, sketches of hydraulic systems she had memorized from textbooks her mother had given her, and the feeling in her gut tightened. Do you feel that she whispered to her sister? Arya lifted her head from the tablet game she wasn't really playing. She closed her eyes for a second, sensing the rhythm. Her brow furrowed. It's uneven. The left engine, Ava nodded slightly, or the hydraulics feeding it. Arya gave a bitter laugh, and if we tell anyone, they'll say we're paranoid kids again. She wasn't wrong. But Ava couldn't shake the thought that something was happening, something the crew should know about. She waited until Rosa returned down the aisle, then leaned forward politely. "Excuse me, ma'am," Ava began, voice steady. "I think there's an issue with one of the systems. I noticed a vibration that doesn't match the flight profile." Rosa blinked, caught off guard, then smiled the way adults smile when indulging a child. "That's just turbulence. Sweetheart, perfectly normal. No." Ava pressed gently. "The pattern, it feels like system pressure fluctuating. Could you check the hydraulics display?" Rosa's smile thinned. "Hydraulics? Where did you learn that word?" "Honey, our mom's a pilot," Arya said, unable to hold back. "She taught us." Rosa cut her off with a chuckle, shaking her head. "That's adorable. But don't worry about grown-up things. You two just enjoy your trip. All right?" She patted Ava's arm, moved on with her cart, and the conversation ended. Arya sank back into her seat, cheeks flushed with frustration. "I told you she wouldn't listen. I had to try," Ava said softly, though disappointment crept into her tone. "If something's wrong, someone has to say it out loud." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of engines and the occasional rustle of magazines. Then the seatbelt sign chimed on, accompanied by Captain Miguel Alvarez's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered a pocket of weather ahead. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened." His tone was calm, professional, but inside the cockpit, the situation was already less routine. Alvarez studied the instrument panel, eyes narrowing at the fluctuations he had noticed earlier. The left side hydraulic system, System B, showed pressure inconsistencies. Not severe, not yet, but the kind of deviation that made a seasoned pilot uneasy. He had learned over decades in the air that small problems had a way of growing teeth. Beside him, First Officer Claire Jennings scanned her screens. Readings are still within limits. Captain, maybe just a sensor glitch, or maybe not, Alvarez murmured. He rubbed his temple, a dull ache starting behind his eyes. Keep an eye on it. If that pressure drops further, we'll need to run the checklist. Claire hesitated, then nodded. She was young, eager to prove herself, but there was no mistake in the tension creeping into her voice. Understood. Back in economy. The turbulence hit harder. The plane jolted suddenly, drink cups rattling on tray tables, a child crying out in fear. Passengers gasped, clutching armrests. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, just turbulence, Rosa announced cheerfully, raising her voice over the murmurs, but her smile wavered at the edges. Arya's hand found Ava's under the armrest, squeezing tight. This isn't just weather, she whispered. Ava didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the storm outside. Clouds swelling into towering columns of gray and black. Flashes of lightning pulsed deep within, illuminating the sky like a heartbeat. She opened her notebook again, scribbling quick calculations, wind shear patterns, storm cell behavior, descent rates. Her pencil pressed harder than usual. She already knew what the numbers meant. Something's coming, she said quietly. Arya shivered, not from the cold. No one's ready to believe us. The plane jolted again, harder this time. Overhead, bins creaked. A tray of half-finished drinks slid sideways on a cart before Rosa caught it. A nervous laugh rippled through the passengers, the kind of laugh people use to cover fear. In first class. Richard Collins scowled, shaking his head. I knew this flight would be a mess. These budget airlines cut corners everywhere. He waved at Rosa, demanding her attention. Get me another drink, and tell the captain to keep this tub steady. Some of us actually pay for comfort. Arya rolled her eyes. Unbelievable. Ava exhaled slowly, centering herself. Focus, ignore him. Another jolt, this one stronger. A baby wailed somewhere behind them. The captain's voice returned, slightly tighter now. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making a course adjustment to avoid the worst of the weather. Please remain seated and keep calm. It was a standard reassurance, but Ava caught the faint edge beneath his words. She glanced at Arya. He feels it too. In the cockpit. Alvarez wiped sweat from his brow. The ache behind his eyes throbbed. He shifted in his seat, jaw tight, hydraulic pressures still fluctuating. Claire, start running the secondary checklist. Claire's hands moved quickly, flipping switches, checking backup systems, still operational, but readings are unstable. Keep monitoring, Alvarez muttered. His chest felt heavier now, though he pushed the thought aside. He couldn't afford distraction, not with 200 souls behind him. The storm loomed larger on the radar, a red blotch spreading wider with every mile. Claire swallowed hard. Captain, the system's projecting severe turbulence if we continue this path. I see it. Alvarez gripped the yoke, knuckles pale. We'll divert around the cell. Inform ATC. Back in row 27, the twins sat rigid, sensing every vibration, every shift of pitch. Arya's jaw clenched. They're losing it up there. I can feel it. Ava stared at the storm, heart pounding. She thought of their mother, of all the times Colonel Naomi Brooks had told them, you don't wait for someone to hand you permission to act. You act when lives depend on it. She thought of their grandfather, waiting in Atlanta, his frail voice echoing in her memory. Baby girls, the sky is yours. She closed her notebook, hands trembling slightly. We're not wrong. Arya, something's breaking, and as the plane lurched once more, dropping just enough to make passengers scream. Ava Brooks realized silence would not be an option for much longer. The clouds outside thickened, rising like dark sentinels, their edges glowing with lightning that flashed without warning. The turbulence had grown from a gentle bump to a relentless rattle, shaking the aircraft from wingtip to wingtip. The hum of the engines no longer felt reassuring. It throbbed in rhythm with a growing tension, a warning pulse that only a trained eye could read. Ava Brooks leaned slightly forward, her notebook balanced on her knees. Each scribbled note, each diagram of hydraulic circuits and engine schematics flickered in her mind's eye. She traced the flow of pressure through the left side hydraulic system again, imagining how the fluctuating reading she had observed could escalate if left unchecked. Arya sat beside her, eyes wide, fingers tightening around the edge of her seat. Ava, it's worse than I thought. The turbulence isn't random. Look at the angle shifts, Ava nodded, whispering. I see it. That storm cell is moving faster than projected. If the aircraft dips into the next band, it'll hit wind shears strong enough to push us off course. The plane jolted violently, throwing the drinks on the tray tables sideways and eliciting sharp cries from children. Overhead, compartments rattled and clicked. Rosa Mitchell tried to maintain calm as she walked briskly down the aisle, her heels clicking against the floor. Please remain seated. Everything is under control, she called, though her eyes betrayed her unease. In first class. Richard Collins clutched the armrests, white-knuckled, muttering under his breath. This is ridiculous. I paid for a calm flight. His voice trailed off as another jolt threw him forward slightly. Up front, Captain Miguel Alvarez's forehead was damp with sweat. He scanned his panel again, noticing the subtle variations in hydraulic pressure that had been creeping higher. Claire, are you seeing this? He asked, voice tight but steady. Claire Jennings' hands moved quickly, eyes scanning multiple displays. Yes, Captain. System B is dropping intermittently. Electrical readings are fluctuating. It's still within operational limits, but it's not stable. Alvarez's jaw clenched. We'll monitor closely. Keep ATC informed if it escalates. The twins exchanged a glance. Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't just turbulence, she whispered. Something is building, and no one else seems to notice it. Arya shivered, not from fear, but from the intensity of anticipation. We need to stay alert. Any moment now, everything could spiral. Hours of simulator training began to play out in their minds the rapid assessment of failures, the coordination between pilot and co-pilot, the split-second decisions that could prevent catastrophe. They had rehearsed for hours scenarios where hydraulic systems failed, engines overheated, and weather worsened. Every detail, every calculation was stored, ready to be used if needed. In the cabin, passengers shifted uneasily. Business travelers attempted to resume work on laptops, but the occasional tremor of the plane made screens wobble and documents slide. Mothers held infants tighter, whispering reassurances they themselves did not feel. Some tried to ignore the rising fear, focusing instead on snacks or magazines. Others stared out the window, realizing for the first time that the sky was not just a backdrop, but a force capable of testing the limits of every human aboard. Ava's eyes caught the reflection of the cockpit instruments on Rosa's tablet as she passed once again. Tiny flashes of red indicators blinked briefly, a subtle warning, but enough for her trained eyes to notice. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with awareness. The readings were consistent with early-stage hydraulic fluctuations coupled with minor engine vibration. On its own, not critical, but combined with the storm cell forming ahead, it was dangerous. Arya. We might have to intervene if it worsens, Ava whispered, her voice calm but laced with seriousness. Arya's jaw tightened. You think they'll ever listen to us before it's too late? Ava shook her head slightly. Probably not, but we'll be ready. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated the cabin through the window. The light caught the glint of glasses, watches, and the curious gaze of passengers scanning their neighbors for answers. It painted the aircraft in stark relief, showing every worried face, every tense posture. Ava and Arya, huddled together, appeared smaller than they were, but their minds were operating at the speed of seasoned pilots. Rosa Mitchell moved to secure the galley cart, muttering under her breath about kids and parents panicking over nothing. She didn't see the tension behind the twins' eyes, the way they were piecing together the puzzle of the aircraft's behavior against the looming storm. In first class. Collins let out a sharp exhale, frustration and fear mixing. Someone should do something. We're flying blind here, he said, gesturing vaguely at the front. No one around him responded. Ava's lips pressed together. The words of their mother echoed in her mind. You act when others cannot. You serve when others fail. Always be ready, even if no one believes in you. Her hands rested lightly on her notebook. She didn't move, didn't speak, but she felt the growing weight of responsibility pressing down. Arya's hand found hers, a silent agreement they would watch, they would wait, and they would act when the moment demanded. Another jolt of turbulence hit, stronger this time. The cabin lights flickered, drinks spilled, passengers gasped. The plane lurched slightly to the left, forcing people to grip their armrests. Ava's eyes tracked the instruments in reflection, her mind calculating. If the hydraulic system continued its subtle descent and they entered the next section of the storm, the effect could cascade into a critical failure. We're approaching the edge of the storm, she whispered to Arya. Soon, we'll see if the systems can hold. Soon, we'll know if anyone else is ready to respond. Arya nodded, her own pulse quickening. We've trained for this, but training is one thing. Reality is another. Ava's hand tightened over her notebook. She stared ahead, determined. The storm outside was growing, but she felt a calm resolve settle over her. She had studied, trained, and prepared for this. Now, all that knowledge and preparation would be tested in the air, in the moment, when no one else could see what was coming. The storm outside was no longer a distant threat. Its edges licked the horizon, growing darker and more jagged with each passing mile. The clouds churned violently, and the airplane's nose pitched slightly as gusts of wind struck from multiple directions. Passengers clutched their armrests, some whispering prayers, others closing their eyes and holding on to hope. Ava Brooks sat upright in 27A, her eyes scanning the faint reflection of the cockpit instruments on the edge of Rosa Mitchell's tablet. She noticed something that made her stomach tighten, a pattern of hydraulic pressure drops across System B that indicated the beginning of cascading failures. It was subtle but unmistakable to someone trained in systems analysis, someone who had memorized every indicator, every fluctuation that could signal danger. Arya leaned closer, her eyes wide and alert. Ava, look. The turbulence is aligning with the hydraulic dips. If they hit the next zone, control could get difficult. Ava nodded, keeping her voice low. We need to monitor and prepare, Arya, but no one up there will listen until it's obvious. That's how it always is." The twins had grown accustomed to being ignored. From the moment they entered Denver International, the Assumptions had been relentless, unaccompanied minors, black teenagers, not competent enough to navigate the journey. Each dismissive glance, each condescending word had been a reminder of how quickly the world judged them, and yet all that judgment, all that doubt, had forged something powerful inside them. They had patience, clarity, and unwavering focus. "In first class," Richard Collins muttered angrily under his breath. "I can't believe the airline allows kids like this to fly alone. They should be seated in the back, supervised." He gestured vaguely at the twins, oblivious to the storm brewing outside and the more dangerous storm forming in the cockpit. Ava ignored him. She had bigger calculations to run. She pulled out her pencil and scribbled numbers in the margins of her notebook, running simulations in her mind that she had trained for countless hours in flight simulators. Each hypothetical scenario, each cascading system failure, was laid out in her head with meticulous precision. Arya's hand found hers under the armrest. "We're not just observing this," she whispered. "We're predicting it. We're ready. Ava." Ava squeezed back gently. "We'll see who else is ready when the time comes." The plane jolted violently, a sudden dip that sent a wave of panic through the cabin. A toddler's cry pierced the hum of engines, mingling with startled gasps from older passengers. Cups rattled, trays slid, and Rosa Mitchell's practiced calm faltered for the briefest second. She straightened a cart, her eyes flicking nervously toward the cockpit. She knew, instinctively, that the turbulence was growing beyond anything routine. Captain Miguel Alvarez adjusted his grip on the yoke, jaw tight. "Claire, how are we looking?" First Officer Claire Jennings scanned her panels frantically. Hydraulics are fluctuating more frequently. Backup power is still holding, but the left engine vibration is increasing. Nothing critical yet, but it's escalating. Alvarez's eyes narrowed. He had flown countless hours in storms, navigated turbulence and emergency landings, and handled crises that would terrify ordinary pilots. But this combination cascading system alerts paired with rapidly intensifying weather was testing the limits of every ounce of experience he had accumulated over 25 years. Ava caught the faint flicker of lights in the cockpit through the reflection. Her mind processed the variables: engine 2, vibration, hydraulic dips, weather turbulence, degraded instruments. Every scenario they had trained for flashed before her eyes, each one a puzzle piece that only she and Arya could assemble with precision. Arya shifted, her eyes narrowing. "Ava, the storm is moving faster than the models predicted. If they fly through that pocket at the current angle, it could exceed structural limits." Ava nodded. "We'll need to act soon. But first, we watch, wait, and prepare." She closed her notebook briefly, fingers tapping lightly against the cover. Her thoughts drifted for a moment to their mother, Colonel Naomi Brooks, deployed overseas, trusting that her daughters were capable of more than most adults would ever understand. And then to their grandfather Henry, lying in a hospital bed, frail yet proud, the same man who had taught them to trust their hands and minds above all else. Ava's focus sharpened. The storm outside was growing. The cabin felt heavier, the vibrations of the plane more pronounced. Every passenger now seemed to sense the danger. Whispers grew louder, nervous glances darted between strangers. Even Richard Collins in first class looked pale, gripping his armrests with white-knuckled intensity. Then came the subtle change that Ava had anticipated. A minor hydraulic dip synced with a gust of wind hitting the fuselage. A subtle vibration easily overlooked by untrained eyes signaled the beginning of a sequence that could cascade into catastrophic failure. Ava leaned closer to Arya. This is it. It's starting. If the cockpit doesn't respond properly, the aircraft could become uncontrollable. Arya's breath caught. Do you think, should we? Ava shook her head slightly. Not yet. Let them recognize the issue first. Intervening too early will make us seem like children again. Timing is everything. The twins sat poised, observing, calculating, ready for action. Every nerve, every instinct, every ounce of training was engaged. They had been underestimated their entire lives because of age and race. But now, all that preparation was converging toward a moment that demanded precision, courage, and clarity. And somewhere in the cockpit, Captain Alvarez made a subtle adjustment, unaware that the very people who could save the day were seated quietly in economy, waiting for the moment their expertise would be needed. The storm had fully arrived. The plane shuddered violently as it entered the heart of the storm. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating faces of fear and uncertainty. Cups tumbled from tray tables, and passengers gripped armrests as the aircraft swayed, buffeted by sudden gusts of wind. In row 27, Ava Brooks's eyes narrowed. She had been watching the subtle patterns, the hydraulic dips, engine vibration, the sync of turbulence with those mechanical signs. Her mind worked rapidly, comparing these signals to the thousands of hours she had spent on simulators. Arya leaned closer, whispering, "This is it. This is when they'll need us." Ava nodded. "Yes, but we have to wait. If we step in too early, they'll dismiss us again. Timing matters." Rosa Mitchell approached, securing the galley cart. She noticed the girl's intense focus and frowned slightly, mistaking it for anxiety. "Everything all right?" "Girls." "This turbulence is normal," she said, though her voice carried a hint of unease. Ava shook her head subtly. "It's more than normal, ma'am. We can help if needed." Rosa paused, assessing their seriousness. For the first time, she wondered if these two teenagers might know more than she had assumed. Meanwhile, Captain Miguel Alvarez and First Officer Claire Jennings were dealing with a rapidly escalating situation. System B hydraulics had dropped below optimal levels intermittently. Engine 2 vibration was rising, and the storm was growing more aggressive. Alvarez's forehead glistened with sweat as he tried to keep the plane level. "Claire, we're entering a high-risk zone," Alvarez said quietly. "Prepare for turbulence and potential control issues. Keep monitoring the hydraulics and engine instruments." Claire's hands moved quickly, flipping switches, checking backup power. "I've got it, Captain, but the readings are unstable. We may need to deviate or declare an emergency soon." The twins exchanged a glance. Ava's jaw tightened. "It's happening faster than I expected. We might not get another chance to step in calmly." Arya's fingers drummed nervously on her tablet. "Do you think anyone else will recognize the severity?" Ava shook her head. "No. That's why it will be us." The turbulence intensified. Overhead, bins rattled violently. Passengers shrieked, holding children tightly. The plane's nose pitched slightly downward before corrective adjustments. In first class, Richard Collins clutched his seat, muttering, "This is insane. Someone should be doing something." Ava noticed the minor hydraulic dips coinciding with each gust. The way Engine 2's vibrations spiked with every twist of wind. It was subtle to untrained eyes. But to her, it was unmistakable a warning that without intervention, the systems could cascade into a critical failure. She leaned toward Arya, whispering, "We can't wait much longer. The crew won't ask for help until it's obvious." A few rows ahead, passengers began to murmur, sensing that the turbulence was unlike anything they had experienced. Some glanced toward the front, looking for a savior. Others clutched each other in quiet desperation. Then the unthinkable happened. Captain Alvarez's voice came over the intercom, tighter, more urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing multiple system issues. This is not routine. I need assistance from anyone on board with advanced military flight training. If that is you, please alert a flight attendant immediately." The cabin froze. The words hung in the air, an invisible weight pressing on everyone. Mothers held infants closer. Businessmen scanned the aisles nervously. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. Ava and Arya had been ready for this moment. Arya straightened, her eyes fixed, heart pounding. "It's now or never," she said softly. Ava nodded. Together, they rose from their seats. The cabin's attention snapped toward them, heads turned, eyes wide in disbelief. Two teenagers, standing calmly amid chaos, claiming the very expertise the captain had requested. Richard Collins nearly fell out of his seat. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You can't, these are children." Ava's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "Sir, we're not here to argue. We're here to help. The captain asked for trained personnel. That's us." Whispers rippled through the cabin. Some passengers laughed nervously, thinking the girls were imagining their abilities. Others stared, frozen between disbelief and hope. Rosa Mitchell stepped forward, studying them carefully. The tension in her expression softened slightly. She remembered their earlier conversation and the focus she had noticed. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were telling the truth. "Are you absolutely certain you have the training?" Rosa asked cautiously. "Yes, ma'am," Arya replied, her voice firm. "We've had thousands of hours of simulator training, knowledge of aircraft systems and emergency procedures. We are prepared for this." Ava stepped beside her, eyes scanning the cabin, noting every reaction. Age doesn't determine expertise. Training, knowledge, and experience do. The murmurs quieted. The disbelief in the cabin began to shift toward cautious consideration. Even Richard Collins faltered, unable to refute the confidence radiating from these young women. Rosa exhaled slowly. "All right, I'll take you to the cockpit. Any help is better than none." The twins moved toward the front of the plane, purpose in every step. Passengers instinctively stepped aside, some still muttering objections, but all aware that the fate of the flight was now in their hands. As they passed, Ava spoke clearly, projecting her voice just enough to be heard. "My name is Ava Brooks, and this is my sister, Arya. We are trained in advanced flight systems and emergency procedures. We are prepared to assist the flight crew." Arya followed seamlessly. "We've studied every system, every emergency protocol, and trained extensively on multi-system failure scenarios exactly like what this aircraft is facing." The cabin fell silent. These were not the words of children. These were the precise, deliberate words of individuals who knew the stakes, who had trained for exactly this moment. Ava and Arya Brooks stepped into the narrow cockpit, the door closing behind them with a soft thud that felt heavier than it should. The fluorescent panel lights reflected off the metal and glass surfaces, revealing a scene that would overwhelm most adults. Captain Miguel Alvarez sat gripping the yoke, face pale, sweat beading along his hairline. First Officer Claire Jennings' hands trembled slightly as she balanced multiple tasks, trying to keep the plane level through the turbulence. "Please," Claire said, voice tight. "If you know what you're doing, I need your help now." Ava stepped to the left of the captain's seat, scanning the array of flashing indicators. Her mind raced through thousands of hours of simulation training, each scenario already programmed into her memory. Hydraulic pressure drops, engine vibration, weather projections, they were all here, all real, all dangerous. "System B is fluctuating more than I expected," Ava said calmly. "Engine 2 vibration is rising. If it continues like this, the left wing could experience asymmetric thrust." Claire's eyes widened. Yes, I see it, but I don't have experience dealing with this combined with severe wind shear. Arya moved to the engineering panel, taking rapid readings from auxiliary instruments. Hydraulic System A has intermittent pressure drops. System B is at roughly 60% capacity with irregular spikes. Electrical backup is functioning but unstable. Wind shear is exceeding 40 knots with rapid directional changes. Captain Alvarez exhaled sharply, leaning back in his seat. "I've never seen a combination like this in 25 years. If we don't act quickly, we could lose control." Ava's calm demeanor contrasted with the storm outside and the panic rising in the cabin. "We need to stabilize the aircraft first," she said. "Manual control for asymmetric thrust, adjust approach vectors to compensate for wind shear. Then we can manage descent speed with the current system limitations." Claire swallowed hard. "You're suggesting a modified approach. That's not standard protocol. It's risky." "Yes," Ava replied evenly, "but the standard approach will fail under these conditions. We have no other options." Arya nodded, eyes scanning the instruments. "We've trained for this, Captain. You're not alone anymore." Alvarez studied the twins for a long moment, weighing his pride against reality. Finally, he exhaled, voice low but resolute. "All right, walk me through it." Ava began systematically, guiding Claire through instrument readings, compensating for hydraulic instability, and coordinating manual adjustments. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and calm. Arya provided constant feedback, monitoring systems, calling out anomalies, recalculating fuel burn, and adjusting for weight distribution as the aircraft fought against the storm. Power adjustments on Engine 2. "Now," Ava instructed, "apply manual trim slightly left rudder to counter asymmetric thrust. Monitor the primary hydraulic lines while maintaining approach speed." Claire's hands moved quickly, following every step with growing confidence. Alvarez's knuckles whitened as he clutched the yoke, but he allowed himself a flicker of relief. The twins were more than capable. They were saving the aircraft. Outside the windows, lightning continued to flash, illuminating the swirling gray columns of the storm. The plane rocked violently, throwing passengers against their seat belts, but inside the cockpit, precision ruled over chaos. "Ground effect compensation will be critical as we descend," Ava said. "Flaring must be timed perfectly to counter gusts pushing us off-center. Prepare for potential landing gear issues due to electrical system degradation." Arya added, "Emergency foam will need to be applied on the runway. Prepare for manual braking procedures if anti-lock fails." Captain Alvarez exhaled, voice heavy but controlled. "I can't believe I'm saying this. Thank you, both of you." Ava allowed herself a small nod. "Let's get everyone home safely." "Captain." In the cabin, passengers could sense a subtle shift. The tension, the rising fear, began to mingle with awe as murmurs spread. Two teenagers, overlooked, underestimated, were now in command of knowledge that could save every life aboard. Richard Collins stared, mouth slightly open, realizing for the first time that the girls he had dismissed might actually be the only reason he would survive this flight. Mothers clutched children tighter, some still unsure, others cautiously hopeful. Ava and Arya worked in seamless coordination, their training evident in every call-out, every adjustment. Claire's earlier hesitation was replaced with focus and trust, relying on the twins' knowledge while still commanding the aircraft. Alvarez observed quietly, awe mixing with relief. The storm had not yet passed, but inside the cockpit, a controlled rhythm emerged. Every calculation, every manual adjustment, every strategic assessment of systems and weather moved them closer to survival. As the twins coordinated with the co-pilot, they silently acknowledged the weight of responsibility pressing upon them. They were not just saving passengers, they were honoring a legacy of skill, resilience, and discipline instilled by their mother, Colonel Naomi Brooks, and their grandfather, Henry Carter. Ava glanced briefly at Arya. "We're ready for the approach. Everything else is stabilizing." Arya nodded, eyes sharp and confident. "Let's bring them home." The storm loomed larger as Flight 892 approached the Atlanta airspace. Lightning flashed, illuminating turbulent clouds that towered menacingly in every direction. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Ava Brooks's eyes darted between the instrument panels and the reflections off Arya's tablet. Every reading, every fluctuation told her what to anticipate next. "Wind shears ahead are increasing," Arya reported, fingers flying across the touchscreen. "Vertical velocity changes over 60 knots, gusts unpredictable. Standard descent procedures won't work." Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. "We execute the modified approach, manual trim for asymmetric thrust, higher initial descent speed with gradual deceleration, and compensate for lateral gusts continuously." Captain Miguel Alvarez leaned back slightly, exhaling through gritted teeth. "You've done this before in a simulator many times." "Captain," Ava replied calmly, "this scenario is familiar. We can manage it." Claire Jennings, her hands steady now, nodded. "Understood. Following your lead." Ava and Arya worked seamlessly. The twins' synchronized coordination remarkable even to Alvarez. Arya monitored backup systems and calculated approach vectors in real time, while Ava guided Claire on every input, every adjustment necessary to maintain stability. Below them, the storm churned violently. Rain struck the fuselage with the sound of heavy percussion, while wind gusts threatened to push the aircraft off its intended path. In economy, passengers felt every shudder. Mothers clutched children. Business travelers' laptops rattled across tray tables, and a soft chorus of anxious prayers filled the cabin. Richard Collins, still in first class, leaned forward, gripping his armrests. His earlier arrogance had dissolved into stark terror. He shot nervous glances toward row 27, where the twins had calmly risen to meet the cockpit. The reality hit him: these girls, so easily dismissed, were now the only hope for survival. Rosa Mitchell moved through the aisles, securing loose items. She glanced back at the twins as they prepared for the descent. I hope you know what you're doing," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Ava's eyes didn't leave the panels. "We do," she said quietly, almost inaudible. The descent began, a delicate balance between speed, altitude, and wind compensation. Each adjustment was critical. Too steep, and the plane risked structural stress. Too shallow, and they could lose control in the gusts. Every instrument reading mattered. Every gust outside was a potential disaster. "Altitude check," Ava instructed Claire. "Maintain 4,000 feet until the next vector. Adjust heading 2 degrees left to compensate for crosswind." Claire's hands moved quickly, executing each instruction while monitoring the readings. Altitude stable, heading adjusted. Aria called out system updates. Hydraulic system B now fluctuating between 45 and 60%. Electrical backup stable for the moment. Engine 2 vibrations manageable, but increasing with lateral gusts. Alvarez exhaled, voice taut. "This is the closest I've been to losing a commercial jet in years. Keep me informed every step." Ava's gaze flicked toward the storm outside. Lightning illuminated the clouds like bright veins, and the roar of wind against the fuselage was deafening. She imagined every gust, every pressure change, every system fluctuation, predicting what would happen next. "Prepare for ground effect compensation," she instructed Aria. "Landing gear deployment may be compromised. Emergency foam required. Manual braking readiness in case anti-lock fails." Aria nodded, calling out to the crew and monitoring systems in perfect sync with Ava. Each adjustment, each calculation, was executed flawlessly, almost mechanically. Yet, with the intuition only experience could provide, the plane dipped lower, entering denser sections of the storm. Passengers felt the descent, some panicked, others silent in disbelief. The roar of engines and the lash of rain combined into a cacophony of terror. Yet, within the cockpit, a precise rhythm had emerged. The twins' knowledge and training turned chaos into order. Captain Alvarez's voice broke the tension slightly. "You two are remarkable. I've never seen such coordination under this kind of pressure." Ava gave a brief nod, eyes never leaving the instruments. "We just follow procedure. Captain, focused on keeping everyone safe." The plane continued its critical descent, the storm testing every system to its limit. Lightning struck closer, illuminating the fuselage and wingtips. Turbulence shook the plane violently, but the twins' steady command kept it under control. Aria's voice remained sharp and calm, left engine temperature stable, minor fluctuation accounted for, heading remains true, adjusting trim to compensate for new gust vector. Claire's hands moved with increasing confidence, trusting the twins' guidance, reading adjustments, following commands, stabilization improving. Passengers felt the shift subtly. The violent shakes became less pronounced as the plane's trajectory aligned with the modifications implemented by the twins. Some whispered prayers turned into relieved sighs. Mothers unclutched children slightly, sensing the shift from imminent danger to controlled descent. Richard Collins, still pale, stared at row 27. I can't believe it," he muttered. "Those girls." Ava and Aria remained focused, unflinching, calm. They moved with purpose and precision, every command and adjustment a testament to their training, discipline, and courage. The runway came into view through the storm, illuminated by flashing lights and emergency signals. The twins assessed the approach. each micro-adjustment calculated to compensate for wind shear, hydraulic limitations, and engine status. Flaring in 3, 2, 1. Ava instructed, guiding Claire with calm authority. The plane descended gracefully, despite the storm's fury. Wheels touched down, landing gear holding firm despite electrical issues. Braking adjustments were manual, applied perfectly to maintain control. Emergency foam had been deployed, runway clear. The passengers exhaled as one, the tension breaking into cheers and cries of relief. Mothers hugged children, business travelers rubbed stiff necks, and Richard Collins sat back, stunned and silent, unable to fully process what had just happened. Ava and Arya exchanged a brief glance, a subtle nod acknowledging each other's calm and precision. They had done it. They had guided Flight 892 safely through a storm that could have destroyed it, saving every soul on board. Captain Alvarez exhaled deeply, voice heavy with relief and awe. "I've never been more grateful in my life." Claire Jennings nodded, wiping her brow. "I couldn't have done this alone. Thank you both, truly." The wheels of Flight 892 screeched against the runway, decelerating under manual braking as emergency foam glistened under the floodlights. The storm had begun to abate, leaving behind a sky streaked with pale gray clouds and the soft glimmer of city lights below. Passengers remained frozen for a moment, hearts still hammering from the ordeal, before the realization of safety began to sink in. Captain Miguel Alvarez exhaled deeply, gripping the yoke one final time before sliding it back into neutral. His face, still pale from stress, carried a mixture of relief and awe. "We made it," he muttered, almost to himself. First Officer Claire Jennings finally allowed herself to lean back, her hands no longer trembling. "I can't believe it," she said, voice still shaky. "I couldn't have done it without you two." Ava and Arya Brooks, sitting calmly in the cockpit, felt a weight lift, though it was replaced by quiet reflection. Every procedure executed perfectly, every calculation accurate, yet the journey had been exhausting in ways that only they could understand. Ava glanced at Arya. "We did what we trained for. That's all." Arya gave a small nod, still catching her breath. All those hours on simulators, every warning, every failure scenario, it mattered. Every second counted. Captain Alvarez finally looked at them fully, eyes wide with recognition. "You two, you saved this flight. Every single life aboard. I can't thank you enough." Ava and Arya exchanged a subtle glance, humility mixed with pride. They had been trained for moments like this, but acknowledgement from an experienced pilot, one who had faced storms and crises for decades, carried weight they had rarely experienced. The cabin began to stir as passengers processed the landing. Whispered conversations turned into cautious applause, then genuine cheers. Mothers hugged children tightly, eyes wet with tears, while business travelers, including Richard Collins, sat stunned, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The two teenage girls who had been dismissed, underestimated, and judged simply by age and appearance had become the reason everyone on board survived. Rosa Mitchell moved toward the twins, her expression softened and respectful. I misjudged you," she said quietly. "You were right. You knew exactly what to do." Arya smiled faintly. "We understand. Most people don't see beyond the surface." "We're used to it," Ava added, voice calm, actions speak louder than assumptions. Passengers approached in small groups, some hesitant, others eager to offer thanks. A man in row 12 holding a folded airline magazine, extended his hand. "I don't know how to say this properly, but thank you. You kept us safe." Another woman whispered through tears, "I've never witnessed courage like that. You're both remarkable." Richard Collins finally stood, face pale, but a newfound respect tempered his usual arrogance. I underestimated you," he admitted, completely. "I apologize." Ava and Arya accepted the acknowledgement silently. They had no desire for fame or accolades. What mattered was that everyone had survived, and that they had fulfilled their responsibility. Captain Alvarez finally addressed the cabin over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the swift and expert assistance of 2 young passengers, we have safely landed. Please remain seated while the crew secures the aircraft. I want everyone to understand the gravity of what just happened and the extraordinary role these 2 played." The cabin erupted in applause, some passengers standing, others clapping softly, all honoring the twins' heroism. The weight of fear lifted, replaced by admiration and awe. In a quiet corner of the cockpit, Ava glanced at Arya. This is what it feels like when preparation meets opportunity." Arya nodded. "And when people finally see the truth of what we can do." Captain Alvarez gave a rare smile, still tense but sincere. "I hope you understand how extraordinary this was. You've set a standard no pilot will forget." Ava's expression was serene, composed. "We're just glad everyone made it safely." Claire Jennings let out a deep breath, hands still slightly shaking. "You're both incredible. I'll never underestimate anyone again. Not by age, not by appearance." Passengers began filing out as ground crews moved in, the city lights of Atlanta welcoming the weary travelers. Reporters already waited, cameras flashing, eager to capture what had become an incredible story of courage, skill, and calm under unimaginable pressure. Outside, the storm clouds dissipated, leaving a calm night. The 2 sisters stepped down the aisle, flanked by passengers who quietly acknowledged them with nods, smiles, and words of thanks. For Ava and Arya Brooks, it was another step in a life they had always known would demand excellence, resilience, and courage even when overlooked. The twins exchanged one last glance, understanding that their actions had created a ripple effect that would linger in the minds of everyone aboard. They had proven that age and appearance are not barriers to expertise, that preparation and focus can save lives, and that true heroism often comes from those underestimated. As the passengers exited onto the tarmac, the city lights reflecting off wet runways, Ava whispered to Arya, "We did it, sister. Everyone's safe." Arya squeezed her hand, a small, exhausted smile forming. "Yes, Ava, and we showed them exactly who we are." The terminal at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson buzzed with activity, but inside, Flight 892 passengers moved slowly, still processing the gravity of what had just occurred. Families clutched children tightly, and business travelers walked with a newfound humility. The storm had passed, but the echo of adrenaline and relief lingered in every corner of the aircraft. Ava and Arya Brooks walked down the aisle, heads held high, but their expressions were calm, reserved. Every eye followed them, not with fear, but with awe. Passengers whispered to each other, recalling the announcement by Captain Alvarez that acknowledged the twins' vital role. Rosa Mitchell approached, her earlier skepticism replaced by respect. "I misjudged you girls," she said quietly. "I see now that you knew exactly what you were doing. I should have listened sooner." Ava smiled faintly. "We understand. ma'am. Most people judge before they know the facts. That's okay, Arya added. Actions often speak louder than words. Captain Alvarez, still catching his breath, approached with First Officer Claire Jennings trailing closely. You too were exceptional, Alvarez said, voice heavy with relief and admiration. I've been flying for 25 years, and I've never seen such calm precision under pressure, especially from someone your age. Ava's gaze was steady. We were trained, Captain. We just applied what we've learned. Claire nodded fervently. I couldn't have managed without you. Your guidance made all the difference. I'll never forget this ever. Passengers began trickling past, offering thanks, applause, and awestruck nods. Mothers hugged their children tighter, whispering words of gratitude to the girls. A group of business travelers, still processing the events, exchanged glances of disbelief. Even Richard Collins, the skeptical first-class passenger, approached cautiously. I owe you both an apology, Collins said, voice subdued. I dismissed you. I judged you unfairly. I realize now that my assumptions could have cost lives. Thank you. Ava's expression remained composed, her voice soft but firm. We don't need thanks. We just did what was necessary. Outside the plane, the lights of the Atlanta tarmac reflected on the wet asphalt. Ground crew and emergency personnel moved efficiently, unaware that the flight had narrowly escaped disaster thanks to the courage and expertise of two teenage girls. The twins paused for a moment, looking back toward the cockpit. Captain Alvarez and Claire stood nearby, debriefing silently, their relief evident in every gesture. Ava's mind replayed the critical moments, every system fluctuation, every turbulence-induced shift, every calculation that had kept the plane stable. She realized how quickly life could hinge on knowledge, preparation, and courage. Arya glanced at her sister, eyes wide with reflection. Do you think they'll ever understand what we did? Not just that we helped, but how prepared we had to be. Ava nodded slowly. They'll understand some of it. Others may never fully grasp it, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that we did it, and everyone's safe. Captain Alvarez approached them once more. I'm coordinating with the airline and the media. But you both need to know that your actions will be recognized officially. This kind of expertise, courage, and composure is rare at any age. Truly rare. The twins exchanged a brief glance, their internal reflection silent but profound. Every lesson from their mother, Colonel Naomi Brooks, every hour spent on simulators, every day of preparation had led to this moment. Their training and resilience had not only saved lives but had challenged the assumptions and biases of everyone aboard. Passengers began to exit, some lingering to offer personal thanks. Children looked up at Ava and Arya with awe, perhaps catching their first glimpse of courage without fear. Elderly passengers muttered blessings under their breath. Rosa Mitchell lingered a moment longer. Her expression softened. You've taught me something important today, she said. I'll never underestimate anyone based on age or appearance again. Ava and Arya nodded. They had faced disbelief their entire lives, and today had been the ultimate lesson in perseverance, preparation, and quiet confidence. Richard Collins, finally finding his voice, said, I will never forget this flight. You've changed my perspective entirely. The twins simply nodded, allowing the acknowledgement without fanfare. They had acted not for recognition, but because it was necessary. Yet, the gravity of the moment was undeniable. They had altered not only the outcome of the flight, but also the perception of heroism in those around them. Outside, the storm clouds had cleared, leaving a calm, star-lit sky. The runway lights reflected off the rain-slicked tarmac, and the city of Atlanta spread out before them, vast and glowing. Ava and Arya walked together toward the terminal, the weight of the night still pressing lightly upon them. Arya broke the silence. "Do you think, after tonight, people will see us differently?" Ava considered the question. Some will, some won't. But it doesn't matter. We've proven to ourselves what we're capable of. That's what counts. They paused at the terminal entrance, watching as passengers moved through the airport, families reunited, business travelers collecting luggage, the ordinary world continuing around them. Yet the extraordinary moment they had created saving Flight 892 would echo in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Captain Alvarez called out to them, voice firm but warm. "Ava, Arya, thank you again. You've set a new standard for courage, preparation, and skill. Never forget this." Ava nodded. "We won't, sir, and we'll continue to prepare. That's all we can do." Arya smiled faintly, and maybe inspire a few people along the way. The terminal buzzed with activity, but for Ava and Arya Brooks, time seemed to slow as they stepped away from Flight 892. The airport lights glimmered against the polished floors, reflecting the quiet triumph in their eyes. They had saved lives, demonstrated skill beyond their years, and altered perceptions with calm precision and unwavering courage. Yet, for them, the moment was not about recognition, it was about responsibility fulfilled. Passengers had begun to share their stories, whispering to each other about the two teenagers who had guided the plane through a storm that could have been catastrophic. Mothers hugged children tightly. Business travelers nodded in solemn acknowledgement, and elderly passengers offered murmured blessings. Ava and Arya moved through the crowd with composed humility, allowing gratitude to wash over them without losing their poise. Captain Miguel Alvarez approached, voice warm and steady despite the exhaustion etched on his face. "You've done something extraordinary tonight. Your actions have set a precedent for courage and expertise under pressure." Ava met his gaze evenly. "We only did what we were trained to do. Captain, the responsibility was ours, and we fulfilled it." Arya added softly, "Sometimes, being prepared is the only way to make a difference." First Officer Claire Jennings, still absorbing the enormity of the situation, nodded. "You've changed how I see everything, from training to trust to courage. I will never underestimate anyone again." Rosa Mitchell joined them, her expression a mixture of pride and humility. "I misjudged you both. Your composure and knowledge saved every life on board. I'll carry this lesson forward for the rest of my career." Ava and Arya shared a brief glance, the twin bond quiet but unshakable. They had faced doubt their entire lives, assumptions about age, race, and capability. But tonight, every prejudice had been confronted with action. Richard Collins, still visibly shaken, approached cautiously. I can't fully express how wrong I was," he said. "Your expertise, your composure, it saved us all. I apologize for doubting you." Ava's eyes softened slightly. "We understand, sir. Prejudices often go unquestioned until proven wrong." Arya's gaze lingered on the departing passengers. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment to show the world what someone is capable of. As they walked toward the exit, The twins reflected on the lessons of the day. Every simulation, every hour of training, every moment spent mastering systems and emergency procedures had culminated in a real-world test of their abilities. The storm had been fierce, the aircraft unstable, and yet through knowledge, focus, and calm decision-making, they had guided Flight 892 to safety. Ava's thoughts drifted to their mother, Colonel Naomi Brooks, deployed overseas. Her teachings, her discipline, and her insistence on excellence had forged the twins into prepared, resilient individuals. She had drilled into them the principle that responsibility never waits for recognition, and action often speaks louder than words. Arya, eyes scanning the terminal, considered the larger implications. People will talk about this flight, about the storm, about the landing. But I hope they also see what it means to trust skill over appearance, preparation over assumptions. Ava nodded. It's about more than us. It's about showing that heroes come in all ages, colors, and backgrounds, and that expertise, courage, and service have no limits. Captain Alvarez approached one final time. The airline plans to formally recognize your actions, he said, but more importantly, you've left a legacy that will influence training and perception for years to come. Ava allowed herself a faint smile. Legacy is less about recognition and more about impact. We've ensured that everyone on Flight 892 had a chance to continue their journey safely. That is enough. Arya's eyes softened as she glanced at her sister. And we've honored the lessons of those who came before us, the courage and skill passed down from our family. The airport terminal began to quiet as passengers moved to claim luggage, call rides, or meet waiting friends and family. Outside, the city lights of Atlanta stretched into the horizon, a calm contrast to the storm that had tested them only hours earlier. Ava took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. We did more than survive the storm. We proved something important to ourselves and to everyone else. Arya smiled faintly, and we've shown that preparation, focus, and courage can make all the difference, no matter how young or underestimated you are. The twins stepped out into the night air, their silhouettes calm against the glow of the terminal. The storm had passed, but its lessons, its challenges, and the proof of their capability would linger indefinitely. They walked forward together, prepared for whatever came next, knowing that courage, skill, and the quiet strength of determination could change lives even in the face of doubt. This story reminds us that true ability is often hidden behind layers of assumptions, and that courage does not always come with age or recognition. Ava and Arya Brooks exemplify the power of preparation, resilience, and quiet determination in the face of life-threatening challenges. Their actions teach us that expertise, diligence, and steadfast focus can overcome prejudice and doubt, creating outcomes that change lives. For older audiences, the lesson resonates deeply. The world may judge capability based on superficial markers, but real impact comes from readiness and the willingness to step forward when it matters most. It encourages us to value skill over appearance, to mentor younger generations, and to recognize that everyone, no matter their age, can contribute in meaningful ways if given the chance. It also illustrates the importance of humility. Leaders and experts must be willing to listen, adapt, and accept help when it comes from unexpected sources. Ultimately, the story teaches that heroism is not just about bravery in the moment. It's about years of preparation, the courage to act, and the compassion to serve others. even when no one else notices. It's a call to trust potential wherever it exists and to remain open to learning from all people around us. Thank you for watching and sharing this incredible story of courage, skill, and unexpected heroes. If you were inspired by Ava and Aria Brooks, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel to discover more stories that celebrate resilience, determination, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people. Your support helps us bring more amazing stories to life.